This is the BMW R18, and what a bike. It's not the normal thing that I like to ride, and it's not the normal kind of thing that BMW likes to make. It's their first ever cruiser, but what a thing. It's big, it's heavy, it's kind of pricey at nearly 19 grand, but it really makes a statement. It's quite stylish. I dig it. Just kind of feels cool to sit on. Alright, so what you want to know about this bike is that the engine is absolutely massive. It uses an 1800cc boxer twin engine, 1.8 litres of utter big piston madness. The engine has a bigger displacement than you get in a lot of cars, and it makes 91 horsepower and 150 newton meters of torque. When you think of big bikes like this, you normally think of Harleys, but with this, I think BMW might just have out-Harley'd Harley. I'll tell you what, if ever there was a bike that brings out that testosterone, a bike that can put hairs on your chest, whether you're a man, a woman, a child, this is it. This thing makes me want to grow a ponytail and a beard. Let's take a closer look at this beast of a thing. It's a work of art. It's actually based on BMW's historic R5 motorbike, and it is sensational looking. The highlight for me is definitely this engine, 1800cc, 1.8 litre, so it's massive, and it actually sticks out by about a foot on either side thanks to these enormous cylinder heads. And actually it's a boxer twin, which means that inside you've essentially got two pistons going hammer and tongs to generate power, and that sends vibrations all throughout the bike. I'll show you what I mean by starting it up. So if I let it tick over, you can actually see the handlebars just vibrating constantly as those pistons go back and forth. And if I give it a little blip, the entire bike tips over to the left-hand side. Man, it's such a powerful thing. Superb. It's also great to look at. I love some of the finer detail on this thing. I love the fact that it's got the BMW logo on the front end. You got chrome on the leading edge of the engine, chrome on either side of the cylinder heads, and these beautiful and intricate chrome exhausts. Then around the back, you've got this exposed drive shaft which constantly spins. Looks gorgeous, but potentially dangerous. I think if you're an old school biker, maybe with long hair, then you don't want to get your ponytail caught in that, trust me.
This first edition model includes white pinstriping and plenty of chrome, although the R18 can also be customized with a more blacked out stealth look if that's what you prefer. Either way, you can spend ages just staring at the intricate detail and finding something new every day. But as much fun as it is to look at, it's even more enjoyable to ride.
Right, I should probably start with that engine, shouldn't I? That's the main party trick here. And it feels exactly as you might expect an 1800cc to feel in a motorbike. It's quite full on. When you twist the throttle, pretty much from any speed, it just pulls so hard. It's not terrifying like on a sports bike where you have to be up near the rev limiter, but it just wants to fly. If you've ever driven a Tesla, it kind of feels like that. There's this immediate, powerful throttle response between 2,000 and 4,000 RPM. And it doesn't seem to ever want to run out either. You've got to really hang on. It's brilliant. The riding position's pretty comfortable. Your feet sit almost directly in line with your knees, which is good. I guess if it had more of a feet forward foot position, then it actually might be even more comfortable, but this is good. Your feet can get a bit trapped under the cylinder heads if you got them too far forward, but that's fine. The handlebars aren't very wide or tall, so ergonomically, on the whole, the R18 actually feels quite good. What I will say is that there's a massive amount of vibration coming up through the chassis. At high RPM, it revs to 4,750 RPM, and if you go there, you really feel it in your bum, which can go a little bit numb after a while, just from the vibrations alone. But again, that's only at the top end, and because there's so much low down torque, it's not really a big deal.
As for the ride quality, the R18 is reasonably firm. Not harsh, but more firm than I expected of a cruiser. But the damping is good, so it doesn't really crash about over lumps in the road. Just don't expect a magic carpet ride. It's surprisingly sporty, and if anything, that vibration and the solidness of the ride combine to make you feel quite involved in the experience.
It's surprisingly heavy as well. I mean, okay, I know I shouldn't be that surprised, but this thing is 345 kilograms. For reference, you'd expect most bikes to be somewhere around the 200 kilo mark, some higher, some lower, but this is a fully grown bloke and a half heavier than most motorbikes. In a straight line, you don't really feel it, but at low speeds, especially when you encounter a corner, you can get a bit taken by surprise by the weight that it's carrying. It also means that it can be slightly tricky to maneuver around town, but BMW have a very clever trick up their sleeve that's definitely gonna help you out, and it can be an absolute godsend.
The R18 has a reverse gear. Sounds completely bonkers, I know, but it makes sense because it's incredibly difficult to maneuver. How you use it is basically you turn it on. Jesus Christ, it's heavy. See, case in point, it's really hard to maneuver. So you turn her on, and then on the left-hand side, there's a small lever. You push that down, and then you put your thumb on the starter, and suddenly she starts to back up. It uses the starter motor as a reverse gear rather than the actual gearbox, but it works like an absolute treat. That is an absolute godsend on a bike like this, and I think there's only been 2 other bikes that I can remember that have this feature, the Honda Goldwing being one of them. So yeah, well done BMW. But it's not all good news. There are a few flaws, I think, with the R18, starting with the sound. This thing has a big old engine and enormous cans, but if you think for a second that it makes a loud noise, then you are sadly mistaken. It's nowhere near loud enough to set off car alarms or to smash people's living room windows, if that's the kind of thing you're into. It's also lacking in a couple of luxury features, I would say. This is a £19,000 bike, but it doesn't come with an option for a sat-nav, which on a cruiser would have been a really useful extra. The dashboard is pretty cool. You get an analog speedo and a small digital display that shows you things like your average fuel economy, 39 mpg right now, the date, the time, the amount of voltage left in your battery. But one thing that's missing is a fuel gauge. You have no idea how far the bike can actually carry you with the fuel remaining in the tank. The other thing that's missing is cruise control. Other BMW bikes have this, not even their big luxury ones, but this doesn't. I've looked on the configurator and I've looked all over this bike, but there is no cruise control, which means that on a long journey, you're gonna have to keep your throttle pinned the entire time, which can put strain on your wrist. What they do have, for some weird reason, is a button that turns off your traction control. When are you ever gonna need to turn off traction control on a big old cruiser? Although I suppose if they put it on there, I might as well use it, right? Yeah. When in Rome,
yes, oh man, you're never gonna get bored of that torque. It's so strong, it's hilarious. Anyway, there are 3 engine modes on the R18, and they are, hilariously, rain, rock, and roll. You get it? It's a cruiser, and cruiser's American, and Americans like rock and roll. Very good. Well done to the head of BMW's dad joke department on that one. Anyway, rain mode is for riding in the rain, or if you're terrified of dying. It kind of restricts the power and the torque quite massively, so it actually doesn't feel that quick. It feels really safe, in fact. Roll, which is the middle setting, cranks up the power and torque a bit more and makes the bike feel more alive. And then rock unleashes all of the grunt. That full 150 Newton meters becomes super accessible. That's my mode.
in terms of handling, the R18 is especially good when you're at speed. It should be terrible. It's big, it's heavy, it has a long wheelbase with 19-inch wheels up front and 16s at the rear, but it's incredibly stable and composed. The whole bike feels cohesive and you can actually hustle it through the corners, within reason. Your foot pegs will bang off the floor at every opportunity, but that's something you get used to and eventually might even start to enjoy.
The gearbox is a bit of a strange one. There's no quick shifter on the R18, so you need to change gears basically manually using the clutch. But of course you don't really need the clutch lever because it's more fun to blip the throttle, bang the gear lever down the cog, a bit like you're heeling and towing in a car, except here it's wrist and towing, isn't it? But when you do change in that manner, it feels super rewarding. The same goes for upshifts. You get your timing right, you bang it with your left foot and it slides up a gear with no fuss. It just makes you feel like you're much more involved than if you were to use a quick shifter. And that makes the riding experience super enjoyable. And you know what? When you're not giving it large, it's actually quite decent. You know, on somewhere like a motorway in 6th gear at 70 miles an hour, it's hovering around 2,000 RPM, which means that the lack of cruise control aside, this is a bike you can enjoy in a lot of different ways. Plus, whatever you're doing, it just makes you feel cool while you're doing it.
The R18 isn't a bike that, on paper, will appeal to too many people. It's a big, old-school looking bike that you'd think might alienate people. But the truth is, it does the opposite. It's a bike that's really easy to appreciate, no matter who you are, what you're into, or what you want from it. Sure, it's by no means perfect. It really needs cruise control as standard and desperately needs a fuel gauge. But if you can ignore these slightly glaring issues, then what you'll find is a fantastic old-school charmer with bags of personality.